what you need. What?
Well, folks,
Did that really?
I believe we may have had the mic muted for majority of the show right now. So I'm
those of you in the
sorry.
Comments, those of you in the comments, can you get
can
this
you
now?
hear us in the comments now? Because I think we may have fixed our technical difficulty issue. I didn't know there was a mute button on the thing. So, if you can hear us, please comment now, because like we were seeing some comments of the buffering was terrible, which I get because the Wi-Fi up here for some reason is not quite as good as it should be. But the silence part might have been my mess up, and I'm sorry for that. But we should have audio now, so if you can hear us, please comment away. I think
we're gonna have to redo the whole damn show.
Nah, we'll
and talking to people involved in the sport.
Yes. So Nelson had just gotten done talking about his first kart purchase. I think you should pick up there, Nelson. Like, so your first kart you purchased was
not that great.
What would you change about that? I guess let's see.
I would have done more research, basically.
Yeah.
Because as far as my general research of karting at first was great. I went and talked to you, talked to Steve, talked to more people. With actually purchasing the kart, I just had this offer from this one guy in my hometown and went with that. No, I instead should have talked with someone who is actively involved in racing and expanded my horizon, actually. All right, then. So that is a bit up to speed, I guess.
Yeah. Up to speed to what we have been able to talk about so far in our show. I guess we'll get into what kind of classes karting is made up of, the structure. We'll start with kid karts, Nelson, because kid karts...
Well, before we get into that, I think we should just briefly go over almost the nomenclature and terminology of how classes are addressed.
Okay, yeah.
Because you'll hear us mention kid karts. You'll hear us mention Briggs and Stratton, 206, senior heavy, and stuff like that. What does all that mean?
Yeah, so... And a lot of times on our show, you'll hear Nelson and I reference Clone, which is an engine that in sprint kart racing isn't around anymore. So I think let's first give you a history lesson of the transition from Clone to Briggs and Stratton 206 racing. When Nelson and I first got into karting, the popular class at the time was Clone, which was a Honda engine that basically you were supposed to be able to buy at Harbor Freight for $150. And it was supposed to be you bolt it on, you go. It was cheap for the racer, and it wasn't hard to maintain.
Yeah, and for those of you that know your engineering, it is a 4-cycle engine.
Yes.
Which has to do with rotational energy basically generated through how many times it cycles through by the time it rotates.
Yeah.
Basically. It's almost comparable to the type of engine you have on your lawnmower.
Exactly. So you have the 4-cycle Clone engine. That gets phased out by the Briggs 206 engine. What essentially ended up happening is the Clone was too open. There was too many tolerances, which means, a part could be, say you're making a yardstick, right? There's a tolerance on a yardstick to be like an inch too long or an inch too short, which was too big of a tolerance. There are too big of those kinds of tolerances in the Clone class to keep it competitive, and engineers and engine builders were getting into them and making these souped up engines, and it was becoming like $800, $900 engines that racers couldn't afford anymore. I've heard of $2,000 Clone engines. It got ridiculous.
Point is, the development got too out of hand. So to cheapen everything down, basically Briggs and Stratton went and made an engine called the 206, which is the same type of technology of being a 4-cycle type engine, but it's sealed, so no one could develop it Thus, the cost would not get too crazy.
Yeah, about an $800 engine, which is sustainably more than the initial price of the clone engine, right? But because it's sealed, because it's hand gone through by Briggs, and the tolerances are so tight on it, it will run much, much longer. It's never on the edge of blowing up. It has a rev limiter in it to keep the racers from blowing it up. And it's a really good thing for karting, and it's been kind of a saving grace the last couple of years and brought a lot more people into karting. It's affordable. It's easy to run.
Yeah. So then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have talked about two-cycle racing or Yamaha type of stuff.
I don't even know if that's the opposite.
Well, yeah.
It'd be the middle end of the spectrum.
I guess. I'm kind of thinking of this in regards to the...
to local racing.
I was going to say local racing and almost from a technology and engineering employed in design.
Okay.
Because all like internal combustion engines are 4-cycle or 2-cycle.
Right.
2-cycle is kind of more like your weed whacker, almost. It sounds like your weed whacker. And yeah, they are substantially lighter weight. And this is typically what most people think of when they think of go-karts. I mean, that might be a little different here in the Midwest, but especially in Europe or out on the West Coast,
they're thinking of 2-cycle
engines are 2-cycle type.
Yep. The 2-cycle, most popular around here is the Yamaha. Currently, well, I'll let you go ahead, Nelson.
Oh, I was just going to say, you say that most popular is Yamaha. So sometimes you'll hear us kind of use those terms interchangeably.
Right.
2-cycle class or Yamaha class.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially the same thing because, like Joseph said, Yamaha is most popular form of 2-cycle racing.
Yep. Right now, 2-cycle racing is going through a bit of a transition period. The Yamaha is still probably the most popular engine at the moment for guys in our area. But is the KT100 engine, which is an engine produced by another manufacturer, is trying to phase out the Yamaha and essentially do for 2-cycle racing what Briggs did for 4-cycle racing.
So what you're saying is that this is a sealed engine that can't be developed. That's supposed to be cheaper almost.
It's not sealed because you can't seal a 2-cycle engine because of the maintenance that needs to go on.
Okay.
But the tolerances and the rules are much tighter than what they are in the Yamaha. The Yamaha is fairly open with their rule package. This KT100 engine is very tight on what you can and cannot do to the engine as far as tolerances on parts.
Well, that sounds good. So, so that kind of lays the groundwork for the types of engines almost.
Yeah, well...
what were you going to add something to that?
I'd say for our local racing, the 4-cycle Briggs and the 2-cycle Yamaha are kind of like locally here at 61 and Davenport Kartway, in the Quad City area and
Concept haulers,
which is kind of near the Chicago area. That's mostly the classes you're going to see.
Yeah.
If you go to a street race...
So, I just want to say, if you go to a local track here, you're basically going to hear two types of engines. Something that sounds like a high-revving lawnmower and your weed whacker. So if you hear it sounding like your weed whacker, then you know it's a 2-cycle. If you hear it like it's your lawnmower, then it's your Briggs, most likely.
So I think then we should elaborate, because a lot of people go to events like the Rock Island Grand Prix, which is a big event for us. And then there's also other street races around the country like Elkhart, this year Quincy being brought back. When you go to those bigger events, there's faster classes because there's a higher level of competition. One step up from Yamaha would be what we call the tag class, which is essentially another 2-cycle engine, Nelson, but it's got a little bit more power and it's water cooled. So you add another component in there with the water cooled. They have obviously a radiator on the side, and because they're so high power and fast, but they don't have a clutch. It takes tag engines a really long time to get going.
And
because
tag, touch and go, that has an onboard starter, doesn't it?
It does have an onboard starter. So another big separating component with tag engines is that you don't need someone to start you like a lawnmower engine needs to be started. You need to pull it. You can start it on board like you would a car with like an ignition switch of some sort. They carry a battery on board.
And then to contrast that with 206 and Yamaha, or 2-cycle, with the Briggs, you pull the starter, and then on Yamaha, basically you got a little starting thing that you stick in the engine. It's a little electric battery basically that spins it to get it going.
Yeah, and so that those are two really big differences. The cost between the Yamaha and the Tag is also extremely different. Mm-hmm. Tags are a lot more expensive. I think there's even 3 or 4 different types of Tag engines you can run at some events. So that's that big difference. And then one step up from Tag would be your shifter class, and those are the really fast guys.
Yes. Now, my chassis, just a little side note, while I do race Briggs & Stratton 206 category, my chassis is actually built for the shifter category. So if I ever wanted to, I could go and do this type of thing.
Yeah. So the shifter class is made up of actually 2 different kinds of shifter engines. There's 2 different shifter classes that are popular nowadays. 125cc stock Honda shifter class is like what SCUSA or Super Karts USA runs, which is like the biggest karting series in the United States, I'd say. Mm-hmm. And then the 80cc shifter is kind of like what you'd find on kind of like a little motorcycle or something. And that's what they run at a lot of street races. Rock Island brought it back a few years ago. Elkhart had like 20-some 80cc shifter karts. The 80ccs are just a step down from the 125cc's. So think of the bigger number as, the more powerful kart. Yeah. And then the 80cc is just a little less powerful. They're both extremely faster than a Briggs or a Yamaha and can accelerate at a very high rate of speed. And so they're a lot of fun to watch, but also, once again, with that higher speed comes a little bit higher cost of racing. So they're the most expensive end of the spectrum.
Higher cost of purchase and higher cost of maintenance, too.
Yeah. If you were going to maintain a 125cc shifter engine, you'd be maintaining it more than probably any of the other engines that you're running. I've heard rumors that because they're stock for the Hondas, that it's less than the Tags to maintain them, but the initial purchase price is still way more. Yeah. So I think that does it for engine classes. Yeah. The big thing you guys need to understand is that these classes are also divided up in other different ways other than engine make and power and performance.
Yeah. Now, before we start broadcasting, actually, we were having a little conversation about what kind of sport could we compare this to. Yeah. So kind of, I guess, in this next category, although we don't know much about ourselves, you could kind of draw some parallels between karting and wrestling.
Yes.
Because other big dividing factors that these two share are weight-based categories and age-based categories.
Yes. I mean, neither of us know a whole lot about wrestling, Nelson, but what I've seen from it is that they're obviously divided by weight, right?
Yeah.
And then you can't have kids wrestling adults. Like, that's just dumb, right? So,
yeah. Dumb and not safe.
And not safe. And so, karting is the same way. You have your kid kart classes, which is the young little 5-year-olds out there racing. They're also very light because they're like 5 years old. But then you have like parallels to like the Yamaha and the Briggs 206 categories. Under both of those engine categories, there's the weights and there's the age groups that classify them.
So like when we say senior 206 heavy, that indicates that the part indicates that that the driver has to be 15 years or older. Mm-hmm. The heavy used to mean that you had to be 300. The minimum weight of the driver and the kart together had to be 390 pounds or more.
Right.
Although that kind of varies from track to track.
It does. It varies from track to track. Typically, if we're talking about the regional racing series, the 206 Cup, if we say heavy, we're talking about a kart and a driver that weigh 390 pounds together.
Yeah.
And if we talk about medium, we're talking about a kart and a driver that weigh 360 pounds together. Yeah. When we talk about 206 racing at our home track, we don't typically say heavy and medium because there's only one class, and the weight is 375 at our local home track.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense not to indicate medium or heavy, because that is basically a middle ground,
Yeah.
if you will. But yeah, that's not just like a 206 thing. Like you can see that in the so sometimes the terminology is a little different in two-cycle racing.
Right.
Like instead of calling it like Yamaha.
350-pound Joseph, because they're
Hold on, are you implying that Gage himself as a person is 400 pounds, Joseph?
With his cart?
Okay, because I was going to say that's pretty mean if you're saying he's that big.
With his cart, if he was 400 pounds with his cart, that would be impressive. For any of you that know who Gage Kemp is, he's pretty light. He was happy to see the weight classes dropped a little bit this year, I'm sure. But in all honesty, medium guys can normally race against heavy guys. Heavy guys will not normally race against medium guys because it's easier to put weight on a cart than it is to burn weight off your body. So that's typically why you'll see maybe bigger numbers in the medium class sometimes, or I guess in the heavy class you'd see bigger numbers because it's easier to just bolt it on and add weight that way.
Right. So I think that about sums up kind of for our introduction there.
I feel like
I guess you can't really call it an introduction because I don't know. Do you want to count this as being 36 minutes in? Because we almost had to restart at the 20-minute mark.
Well, we'll recap what we talked about at the beginning with the meeting at the end of the show. For those of you who are, I guess none of you heard what we talked about at the beginning of the show, but we will talk about the 61 Kartway winter meeting after we're done talking about all this introduction stuff to karting. So that wraps it up for how classes are divided. I feel like we've done kind of a really confusing job of like talking about this. It's hard to follow. So I'm going to make like a bracket for you guys and post it on our Facebook page of how classes are divided and like...
Yeah, visualizing stuff always helps.
Yeah, so we'll put a visual out there for you guys so that you can see this, and hopefully that helps as well. We'll also post a link to 61 Kartway rules so that if you're interested in getting in karting, you can click on the link and it's right there.
Yeah.
But the next thing we want to talk about are the different types of karting. Yes. On top of having different classes, there are different like types of karting. So there's three major different types we want to go over. There's kind of a fourth, but we're pretty much going to go over these three major types. Sprint kart racing.
Which is kind of basically what we do.
Yeah, that's what we do.
The most common type.
The most common type of karting. There's enduro karting,
which is basically taking karts onto a car track like Road America or Mid-Ohio or Daytona.
Right. And racing them on those bigger tracks.
Yeah.
Imagine enduro kart racing is probably, I'd say, the least popular type of the three types we're going to talk about.
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah. Just because it's hard to hold an enduro kart race at a racetrack like every week. You have to travel quite a bit for enduro karting.
Right.
The third type of karting is oval kart racing, which involves paved ovals and dirt ovals.
Typically
obviously.
Dirt, though.
Yeah, typically dirt ovals. A side note on oval kart racing, we talked about how Clone has essentially died in sprint racing. Clone is still very much alive in oval kart racing.
Yeah, that's kind of like more of an engineering competition, if you will, in oval racing.
Yeah, there's a lot more of a power game going on between engine manufacturers than there is in sprint kart racing right now.
In oval racing, they really promote the idea of developing a fast engine and even a tire development of sorts. Mm-hmm. Whereas in sprint racing, it's more about what can we do so that the equipment is the same, but or I shouldn't say the same, but similar. So it's more down to driver ability instead of engineering.
Yep. And so, like we said, sprint kart. I think we've kind of covered sprint kart racing enough.
Yeah.
Enduro kart racing. These karts can go like upwards of, gosh, the slow ones are 85 miles an hour. And, like, the fast ones are, like, 120, 125 miles an hour, I want to say. They use the same engine basis for the most part. instead of having the 206, they have basically the same engine, just without the restrictor on it, which is called an animal. They have the shifter carts.
I'm sorry, continue, and then I have something to add.
Yep. And they have tag racing as well. So those are kind of the three main categories in enduro kart racing.
Yeah, just a side note about Briggs' 206 engine. Other than being its name, 206 references its size, being 206 centimeter.
Yep. Yes, that's a very good point to add in there.
Which is a very typical nomenclature for naming engines in karting.
Yep.
Because Briggs, specifically for enduro, will also make a what is it? A 360. They also make. That would be for enduro type racing.
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
I don't know a whole lot about the enduro racing. I know.
Because I was pretty into that stuff, and I remember looking into that, and I saw a lot of the entry lists had people running what would be basically a Briggs & Stratton 360.
I think that might have been. It could have referred to weight as well. So it could have referred to that as well. But there's also a little bit different kind of gasoline used in some of those engines. Like, I know they use methanol for the Briggs carts on enduro racing, and you use typical pump gasoline for ours. So just some slight differences. The main difference, though, is the speed and the type of tracks you race on in enduro racing.
Right.
Oval racing, the big difference we want to talk about, chassis are offset, which is a huge difference. You're only turning left, so trying to get all that weight to the inside. Also, full body work on oval kart racing for the most part. Sprint racing, you'll see a lot of what's called CIK style body work.
That's basically where you can see the driver's feet and stuff. Yeah. It's like a very small type of nose.
Yep.
And then you have Gold Cup style, which kind of looks like the full body type of thing that covers up most of the front end.
Yeah.
The Gold Cup is kind of more of a Midwestern thing.
Yep.
Whereas the CIK is more West Coast and European.
Yep. Oval kart racing, divided, pretty much made up of just Yamaha and clone engines. There's no real shifter engine on the oval scene. I can't even think of like a tag engine that's competed. There are a few dual engine classes in oval kart racing still, where you have like two Yamaha engines on the back. Which
I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, that's what
that's crazy.
That's what Larry Ringer runs. He runs a dual rear engine Yamaha kart. I'm like, yeah, man, that's insane.
Yeah.
But I guess that kind of leads us into our fourth category that we wanted to mention here. It's not the most popular category of racing right now, but it is a very interesting category of racing. You see them at Rock Island, and they do have their own racing series in the Midwest.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's vintage kart racing. Yeah. Actually, they're not unpopular. They're very popular. There's a lot of vintage kart races out there. I think the race they had at 61 last year had like 60 or 70 vintage karters.
Yeah, so that's about accurate. I was there.
Yeah, and that's a lot of racers. So whatever events they go to in big numbers. But basically, these are older karts. That they're not making rules for anymore. They run older engines. Some engines you can find in this class are Yamaha. You can still find Yamaha. You can find what's called a McCullough engine. I don't know a whole lot about it. It's a 2-cycle engine. It sounds really, really loud.
Yeah, all those old things sound loud.
Yeah. They have dual rear engines, kind of like some of the oval kart classes do, but they have dual rear engines, and those guys are really loud. I'm sure you can testify to that as well, Nelson.
Yeah.
And they run on really, really skinny tires, and their chassis are not very sophisticated. So, yes, they're a different breed of racing altogether, and I think it's important we give them a shout-out here. If you want to check out a lot of vintage kart racing, go to Racing Psychic's channel, because he has a lot of videos, not only on vintage kart racing, he has a couple of 206 videos on there, but he has a lot of videos with vintage kart stuff and builds and stuff. It's a very cool channel. I'd go check out Racing Psychics. It's done by Welt Racing, and they do a fantastic job promoting karting. So go check them out.
Yeah, and then suppose a subcategory, if you will, of sprint type racing, street racing.
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be basically anything done on a street circuit, which would be Rock Island, obviously. Kart. You could say Quincy is a street race.
Quincy is considered a street race because it's
Through
technically
a park.
It's through a park. It's on
Yeah.
public roads, I guess, technically. But the main thing you need to know about sprint racing is that these are courses that are not normally used for karting. They're generally in a place where the public can view karting very, very easily. They tend to draw big crowds because they're right in the middle of a town or a city.
Yeah, which Kart is notorious for.
Yeah. And then, they're also much more dangerous for us racers because there's walls to run into.
Yeah.
They've been making it safer and safer over the years, which I'm glad for. But definitely the wall aspect is a whole different aspect of street racing. But all that street racing still falls under sprint racing, technically. It's a type of sprint racing.
Right, because it's obviously not an oval.
No.
It's not a form of enduro, because enduro is specifically about on tracks built for cars.
Yep.
So, yeah, and it's not really different enough to qualify it as its own category. So, street racing is considered a subcategory of sprint racing.
Yep. I think that about does it for our three major types of karting. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that the public needs to know in order to get them involved at the kart track, Nelson.
Yeah, I mean, there's always something.
There's always something.
I mean, heck, there's even stuff I want to know about.
Yeah. Basically, like Nelson and I have said, if you can get to the track and just experience it, I'd say you and a couple friends come to the track and just ask questions. I know Tony Nielsen, who runs our track, is more than happy to answer questions about karting.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a kart, he knows exactly where you can get a kart. So go there. But definitely ask questions and don't be afraid of the karting community because we're all very helpful.
Yeah.
We all want you to come and join our community.
We do, and I think that is the thing that kind of separates us from other forms of racing. I mean, I know I don't mean this to throw any other category of racing under the bus or anything.
No.
But kart racing is known for having a very welcoming community.
Exactly.
So when you come out and see us, there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Yeah.
We are so happy whenever anyone new wants to get involved in the sport. So you, your friends, your family, anyone that's interested, come on out to the track. Even if it's not our own, it's as cool to see people involved in the sport.
Another thing I want to say, if you're someone who doesn't think they can afford karting, I love interacting with fans at the track. If you want to just come out and watch a race,
yeah.
I think it's not even, it's $2 to go and watch a race at 61 Kartway for a grounds pass, which is way more affordable than going to the Davenport racetrack, not the kart track, but the racetrack.
Yeah,
paying like $15 to watch a stock car race. So $2 to watch a go-kart.
And probably
race.
More entertaining, too.
And probably more entertaining. So $2 to go watch a go-kart race. After the race, everybody's always having a good time and willing to talk to you and interact. So don't be afraid to come up to us racers, even during the day at 61. We're normally not too stressed out. Normally, we get stressed out at street races because we're under high pressure to fix whatever we've broken. But seriously, always, I love interacting with fans, and especially if you got kids that are just interested in the sport. I love talking to kids and showing them around the racetrack and showing them the kart and stuff. So come on out to the racetrack and don't be afraid.
Yeah, so it seems like our stream health is back up, so we don't have to worry about that too much anymore. I will reiterate again, if anyone currently listening has any questions about karting, feel free to ask.
Mhm.
Like we said, no dumb questions. Drop the comment, drop a question.
Let me apologize for the microphone muting in the first 20 minutes of the show. I'm sorry, that was my fault. I saw all the comments. I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I finally figured it out. It took me 20 minutes, but I did finally figure it out. But thank you for letting me know, because I was like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
And our stream health has gotten better as the show has gone on. So we just got a new internet router here, so...
Oh, okay.
That's probably part of it.
Because I was going to say, I know sometimes your Wi-Fi is not the best.
Yes.
But I mean, it's usually not this bad.
Yeah. It's been getting progressively better throughout the show. So.
And also, too, if you happen to be listening to this after we post it, feel free to comment on Facebook, comment here on YouTube, or even reach us on Snapchat or Twitter or something. We can help with any questions, or we can address that in the next video, or, just questions. Leave them.
Yeah, leave them. Oh, by the way, for all of you listening out there who know of this holiday, Happy Pie Day.
Oh, no.
It is Happy Pie Day. Yes, Happy Pie Day.
Oh, gosh.
I had to say it. But yes, Happy Pie Day. It's, a day to eat pie and do math. Nerd. I think since our first 20 minutes of the show kind of got blocked out there, Nelson, let's go over to 61 Kartway meeting again really quick for all these fine folks at home.
Yes, yeah. So not much to touch on, but I went out to the 61 Kartway preseason meeting last weekend, while Joseph here, he was stuck doing something lame like school, I believe.
Yes, I was doing school.
Actually, before we get into the news, we've got a question.
Yes, we have a question. Yes, a question!
All right. And I know who that is. That's my brother, Henry, actually. So, what's the cheapest karting class to get into? Well, you want to answer that, Joseph?
I'll answer that because it does depend on when you start karting.
I was going to say that, too.
Because the cheapest class by far is going to be Kid Kart. It's a teeny tiny kart, a very low power engine. I think it's like not even $1,000 to get a Kid Kart in some cases.
Yeah, but there's a limit as to how much you can use that. Because that is literally used. What's the age cap on that? No more than 8 years old.
I think once 10? You get to 8 or 9 years old, you're done in Kid Karts.
Yeah,
it's very size dependent because Kid Karts are only like X size. So once you get past that size.
Right.
You can't race them anymore.
But I think looking at it overall, the 206 type of sprint racing is probably the cheapest thing you can do.
Yeah.
Because, that engine in of itself, you might say, wow, that's kind of pricey, having to buy one for $500-$600. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's fairly cheap because you won't have to worry about maintenance because it's sealed. It lasts a very long time.
Yeah.
I even told a friend that engine is basically indestructible.
Yeah, it's pretty much indestructible as long as you put oil in it.
But no, this question is class. So yeah, I would say anything involving the 206. So yeah, if you're young, like a junior 1, junior 2, if you're older, senior, and then just chop around for a chassis that is at least semi-competitive. I mean, if cost is your issue, you can find a good deal, but don't get the cheapest thing you see, because I made the mistake of doing that, and that was a huge mistake. So it goes back to research, as to what I was saying earlier in the show. You want to get something that is cheap, but not too cheap.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Nelson. And to kind of back up Nelson's facts here of that 206 is the cheapest class, typically what you see people do as they progress through karting is they'll start out in Kid Kart with what's called a kind of a Comer engine, which is like a 2-cycle engine for Kid Karts, which is pretty cheap. And then you'll see them move up to like the junior Yamaha and then like the sportsman Yamaha. But then when they get to the 206 class, Yamaha becomes a lot more expensive. And so they almost end up switching to 206 because it's the same expense as what they've been running. So the 206, if you just get it right away, it's going to pay itself off down the line.
Yeah.
And the junior 206 classes are cheaper than the Yamaha classes, obviously. But sometimes because people are looking for that extra little bit of speed at a young age, they they go the Yamaha route because it's not all that much more to get it to the Yamaha. Once you get into senior classes, things really start splitting off cost-wise. Like,
correct.
206 is by far the cheapest. Shifter kart is by far the most expensive. And then you kind of have, like, Tag and Yamaha in the middle there.
All right, so I'm going to dive back into the news as to...
Yep.
But before I do that, just keep any questions coming, and we can address those once I'm done with the news here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in the 61 preseason meeting, we got confirmation that the new weight for Senior 206 will be 375 pounds, which is a nice middle ground between medium, which, as we were talking about before, would have been about 360 pounds, and heavy, 390. So, yeah, 61, we're not going to really have a heavy or a medium. It'll all be compressed into one category with 375 pounds, which should help with numbers. The track will also be altered. The moneymaker, for those of you unfamiliar, that is probably the sharpest and slowest turn on the course, which is at the end of the long straightaway that runs parallel to the interstate.
Yeah.
This corner, part of the inside, is being taken out, so now it will be slower, and the braking distance will be longer, which, in my opinion, will help with racing, because having a longer braking distance, you'll have more of an opportunity to pass.
And I think another big reason that they wanted to do that, Nelson, is because we had heard a lot of complaints from drivers about that corner kind of being rough.
Yeah, it was.
And so they wanted to make it a little easier on the chassis and stuff going through that corners. I know several people that have complained about it. I expect to see those people at the track because they complained about it and messed up my favorite corner. But to be honest, I'm really hoping it's easier on the karts and it helps everybody out and makes it a better racetrack.
Yeah, and then the other not really change, but I guess confirmation too, is that it sounds like we'll be having more races that will be 2 10-lap heats. Yeah. And then the 15-lap feature, which, of course, 61 Kartway has always attempted to do this, but having lower grid numbers has kind of forced them to run shorter races. Yeah. But it sounds like 10, 10, and 15 will be the new normal.
At least for a senior class.
Yes, right. Yeah, because Kid Kart will probably run an 8, 8, and 12 deal.
Yeah.
Most of the classes 10, 10, 15. There will also be a really big mid-season race, which is already confirmed to have double points, and there are also talks that sound like that there will be at least one reverse layout race. Now, there has been no confirmation of this yet, but it sounds like that will probably be the mid-season race as well, which would drum up a lot of interest. Because being double points, you'll have people who have missed races saying, oh, well, let's go and gain back those lost points.
Yep. It's more of an equal playing ground because it's not the track we always run, too, I would say.
That, too. And then it'll help people who don't normally race there want to come out and say, hey, it's a totally new experience.
Yeah. Everybody's kind of on equal footing. It could be a really interesting race.
Yeah.
Definitely an opportunity to make up some points or lose a whole ton.
Oh, God. Yeah. So, and then not really newsworthy, I guess, but just a little comment. Oh, God. Just read this comment. But before I answer that, but just some little speculation, I guess. There will be a 61 challenge this year, obviously, as we all saw from the schedule posted, which that will be in the fall. There's only one this year.
Yep.
But we were kind of joking around about different formats for that race.
Oh, really, Nelson?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let me hear this different format.
Okay. 61-minute timed race, mixed class.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Idea. No, I don't know how popular that is, but that is something that and some other formats have been floated around. So we might see something different for the fall challenge. I don't have any concrete facts. I can't even speculate as to what they would be, but it sounds like we might have a different setup this year.
For racers that are listening, if you like the idea of doing a timed race or you want to see a different format for the 61 challenge, speak up, because Tony's more than willing to listen to you on, kind of like what would be fun. Because that's what we're all here to do is have fun. And I'm always for a longer race.
Yeah.
So.
Even though it'll be painful.
Yeah.
No, racing's fun.
Yeah. So definitely, that is a really cool idea. I like that idea. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Was there any other news from the meeting?
I think so. Unless, am I forgetting something?
No, I don't think you're forgetting anything. I mean, the weight class change.
Yeah.
The corner
distances,
change,
the corner.
the distance.
The midpoint, the reverse, that stuff. Yeah, okay, that's everything. Okay, so new question. How dangerous is karting? Huh.
You want to start answering? Or you want me to start answering?
I'll answer that since you started the last one.
Okay.
I suppose how dangerous is karting? I suppose that kind of depends on the kart itself and the track being raced at. Like, I would say Rock Island in of itself has to probably be one of the most dangerous things you can do in a kart because of the walls, because of the high speeds. But I guess if you're talking about in a more general sense of like at the club level, it can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. But if you're experienced, I would say club racing is actually fairly safe.
I think a big part of any type of motorsport is teaching the younger drivers and newer drivers how to go about it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I remember one of the first times you got in a kart, Nelson, your brakes failed.
Oh, no, not this, not this. I didn't realize we were going to bring this up.
So, Nelson's brakes failed, and he decided it would be a great idea to try to come into the pits and slow down in the grass that was at the end of the pits. He flew through the pits, almost hit about like 3 or 4 people. Not Nelson's smartest decision. We get that. Those aren't situations that typically happen at a go-kart race, and like normally people learn from those kinds of mistakes or are told beforehand, like, if this happens, just run it off into the grass on the track and slow it down or shut the engine off.
Yeah.
You know,
which I've since learned from that, obviously.
Yes. I would say that karting is safer than football almost.
Agreed.
I see one race a year where guys get carted off because they got hurt. And like 2 or 3 guys got hurt that race. So I see 3 guys in how many months of racing? 8?
Yeah.
8 months of racing.
Yeah.
Get wheeled away in an ambulance. And normally when they come back, it's either something minor or nothing at all.
Yeah.
Compared that to football, where I've seen multiple concussions in a single game, so I'd say karting isn't more dangerous than any other sport. But I mean, there is a higher risk involved because we're traveling at a high rate of speed, and when stuff goes wrong, it can go really, really, really wrong.
Yeah, but I do think, and like I said, speaking generally in the sense of club racing, you got to consider that club racing tracks have grass as runoff all around.
Karts don't run in grass. They're too low.
They're too low to the ground. It's fairly safe. If something goes wrong with the kart, you can just, like, say your brakes fail, just go into the grass and it'll stall out.
Mm-hmm.
If your throttle gets jammed, I suppose, you could even do almost the same thing. Pull out the spark plug and there are chances for things to go wrong, but generally things are built that you can, if you know what you're doing, you can escape just fine.
And the rules and regulations that are in place, like to have an EMT, right there, and the people that work the track are experienced enough to where when something does go really wrong, like normally we're right on top of it.
Yeah.
Last year we had Max Skeitzenauer flipped, and we all had a little bit of a scare there. I think it was towards the end of the season when it happened.
Yeah.
And we were all worried about him. He ended up being just fine, but red flag was pulled out immediately. Everybody was stopped on the track, and it was handled very professionally. And I don't think his dad or his mom ended up, sprinting out onto the track or anything while karts were going around, which is the worst thing that you can do. Everybody stayed calm and composed, waited for the karts to stop, then went over and went to see how Max was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as a system, what you're saying there, in a sense of both being proactive and reactive, karting as a whole is safe in both regards because you do have all of these systems in place for it before something goes wrong. I just look at the structure of a cart, specifically one that even has like plastic side pods. Like you got this plastic to act as like a bumper, and then you got the steel frame to offer protection. And then you got the EMTs that are on the track in case even that fails.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, stuff is going to go wrong in karting, but you do have all of these systems and all of these rules in place to lower the chance of something like that happening or keep the driver safe in the case of something like that happening.
And I think another thing, that's important to bring up is that, you can get hurt doing just about anything. I mean...
Oh, that's... Yeah.
I mean, I could get hurt racing a go-kart. I could get hurt walking down the street. I fall in a pothole or something and twist my ankle,
Yeah.
Anything can happen anywhere. So, I think that's what makes karting fun is, you can feel that you're alive. So,
Yeah.
it's definitely a fun time, and I don't think it's any dangerous than going out playing soccer or football or base. It's definitely more dangerous than playing baseball. Sorry, Dad. But no, I mean, you could get beamed by a pitch in baseball at 100 miles an hour, right? And I mean, there's people who have died from that. So, I mean, it's no different than any other sport, especially with how far it's come in the past 20 years. I mean, Kart was taken off the schedule of racing because it used to be too dangerous. When I went there last year, they had improved it 20-fold. It was the safest street race I'd ever been at. Granted, I've only ever been at 2 street races. But, Quincy's being brought back this year. It was a really dangerous street race at the time. I've heard they're bringing in like 2-3 times the amount of barriers that they used to bring in. So it continues to improve in safety. You can never make it 100% safe, but we always do the best we can. We're constantly improving helmets. That's why helmets expire and go out of date. We have neck braces and chest protectors and everything we can possibly do to make it as safe as possible.
Yeah, and I think this question also can loop back to, being interested and wanting to get into karts. Because I know I've talked to some people that have spoken about having an interest in getting into karting, but they say, "Oh, that's too dangerous for me," or something. I mean, yeah, I know we all have our personal preferences about what we consider too dangerous, but that's not really much of an excuse as far as not wanting to race.
Yeah, I agree. Like, there's a certain level of danger you accept as a driver, but like I think it's way safer than football. So, and if any of my friends that played football in high school came up to me and said, "Wow, karting is dangerous," I'd probably call them a moron because I think they have more concussions than I've ever gotten in my 6 years of karting, and they played 4 years of football. So, you gotta take it all with a grain of salt. Obviously, I think there's danger involved with everything, but overall it's pretty safe, and I've never been seriously hurt. Knock on wood, but I've had some pretty tough licks and not gotten hurt, and I've seen some people take some pretty tough licks and not gotten hurt. So it's a safe sport, and hopefully it continues to be as safe as it has been.
Yeah. So I believe that about wraps it up for us. Did you want to address anything else?
I can't say that I have anything else to address except this upcoming season is going to be a fantastic one, Nelson. I'm looking forward to the couple street races that you're going to be attending and being with my friends again at the track. But it sounds like for the racers listening out there that the 206 senior class is going to be really strong this year. We had a junior driver move up. I know we have Carter Pease has gotten a hold of a 206. Morgan Schuler, he told me he basically has a 206, and he just got a new Margate chassis. He's got everything he needs to be ready to go. You and me, combine that with Thor and Odin, who want to get out to the track more this year, from what I've heard.
Yeah, and that sounds like that'll probably happen. I talked to Thor at the meeting. He seems very optimistic about being at the track more frequently.
Yep.
I even talked to Carter recently over social media, and he said, well, he might not make it out for every race. He will be there for the majority of our 206 races.
Yeah, so for those of you who want good competition, I think 61 Kart, as good of competition as we had last year, it's going to be even better. I mean, Nick has a free year of racing, so he's almost like, I feel like, Nick, if you're listening, you should almost be guaranteed to show up. I
feel like he's going to come up with some excuse.
I texted him yesterday. They've had some jobs they've had to get done around the house and stuff, so he hasn't gotten the cart back together. But I have to give him his gloves back, so he can't drive yet anyway. But yeah, it's going to be, I think, a stacked field, and hopefully we can convince Tony Nielsen to get out there in a few races with us and get some of the Davenport guys out there like Dittmer and Payway and maybe some Sugar River guys at some point too. But I think we're going to have at least 10 carts on a weekly basis at 61, and that's good. So
yes, it is. And not even at just the club level, seeing growth all around with the return to Quincy, strength in Elkhart's return, and